All right, so we were at 2020, beginning of 2020. We have a pandemic going on. We have economy that's getting affected by that. We have social justice issues surrounding us. We have elections coming up. We have environmental issues like wildfires going on. So it just is not ending, right? We have a whole number of reasons causing us a lot of uncertainties. So uncertain times like these can severely test and reveal the quality of organizational leadership. So in this panel, we want to talk about what does leadership mean during these uncertain times. Our panelists will share their experiences in navigating change in their teams, in their organizations, and even in their careers. And they'll share with us what worked for them, what did not work for them, and how should we plan for unforeseen change. So before we start, I'll just tell our attendees that they can submit their questions in the Social 27 platform. I have turned off my Social 27 platform because I think that's where the feed was coming. So I'm not seeing that tab for now. I'll go back to it after the discussion is done. But please submit the questions. Anjali from my team is monitoring that tab. And we'll pick your questions towards the end after the discussion is over. All right, to start with, I would like all panelists to give us an introduction. Nancy, can we start with you? Could you give us a quick introduction for yourself?
Sure, I'm Nancy Riley. I'm a VP of product at HubSpot and the general manager of our ecosystem group. So APIs, integrations, developer tools, all of that kind of thing.
Very nice, thank you. Hope?
Hi, everyone. I love this forum and this group, so thanks for including me today. I have been a CFO in multiple environments. I think the one consistent thing about my different environments has been just massive change in all of them, both good and hard. So, I've led through a lot of crazy times. I'm currently on the board of MongoDB, New Relic, and Hasbro. I'm also an investor in, young companies and a role with Madrona Venture Group.
Got it. Thank you, Hope. Welcome. Hey, Vijay.
Hi, my name is Vijay Raghunathan. I'm the head of engineering and product at Expanse, a cybersecurity company. I'm obviously really excited to be part of this panel, to contribute a little bit of my experiences and insight, but most importantly, to kind of learn and hear what other people have to say and hear what kind of questions there are, and just hope to expand my horizons as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Vijay. Welcome. Jin.
Hi, this is Jin Jiang. I'm currently a director of engineering at Facebook. I always have a big passion related to advancing women in product. Not to mention today, I think the leadership needed for uncertain time are not only important for all of our teams and organizations, but especially for women in product field. This is a time to grab leadership opportunity in all sorts of fronts.
Thank you, Jin. Welcome. All right, so let's get started. So there are several kinds of leadership, right? So we are going to focus on 4 broad categories. The first one is organizational leadership. The second is corporate level leadership. The third is societal leadership. And fourth is self-leadership, right? How to be a leader for yourself. And so those are the 4 various categories. I'll start out with organizational. And because we are remote, I'm going to call out the names and I'll go in different orders, but I would like to hear from all of you. So organizational leadership, I want to start with a mid-manager level. Let's say I'm a mid-manager and the challenge I'm dealing with is how to keep employees motivated under stress. Employees are under tremendous stress these days. They're stuck at home and they're juggling remote work and kids and family and health issues, and we're worried about the economy and job and all of those things, right? That we are all experiencing. But the work still continues to happen. What are some things that I as a mid-manager can do to keep my team motivated and look forward to coming to work? So can we start with Jen?
Sure. Facebook is a very people-focused company. I experienced exactly what that means since March. So one example you will notice is Facebook made several announcements related to our work from home policy, right? Where we're strongly encouraging team members to work from home. And if you notice sort of the up till, right, the date always align with the end of summer from a school year parenting perspective. So previously, when we were very, having very unclear situation, we said, this will be at least through end of summer for 2020. And right now, we're telling all the team members to say, feel free to arrange work from home through, July and summer of 2021. This is precisely a way to indicate and give that comfort level to say, we know what you're going through and you can plan this way. We will not come back and interrupt your plan, right? So I felt this is really a big part is you need to empathize with team members first, understanding the situation they're in, and that helps you to connect, gives the starting point, and quite frankly, the level of motivation from there became much natural.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing I heard you say is you're telling them way ahead of time that they can stay work from home till middle of next year. So that way it's a bigger line of sight that they have and they can plan things on their end. It's not just 1 month or 2 months. It's a really long period for them to really plan. Nancy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the policy changes and the allowing people to plan and work from home is critical. But even despite that, right, if your kids are going to remote school right now, you probably feel me that it's still not easy and people are still under a lot of stress. And I think it was really timely, actually, because we had a pretty open discussion about this at our senior product staff meeting today. And bottom line, it's hard. So you have to start with empathy. I mean, we're all under tremendous stress. And if you can be vulnerable and share that with your team and kind of open the door for them to feel it's okay to talk about it. But even then a step further when you're meeting with the folks on your team, genuinely asking, how are you? How's your workload? How can I best support you? And then actually take action. So, I feel like as leaders, mid-managers and up, we can, we only have a few levers, right? We can reduce the amount of output we're expecting and that we're committing to for our team. We can change deadlines, or we can look at the things we're adding as overhead, whether those are status updates, interrupts, project reviews, that kind of stuff, and how can we reduce it? So I think not just listening and empathizing, but then taking action to help them make their situation better is what's going to build that trust and then keep them motivated to want to work with you and keep working for the company.
Very nice. Yeah, very, very useful tips that you empathize, but also take action, and a few levers that you said, very appropriate. Hope?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when this question popped up, empathy was the first word that popped in my head, and everyone's used that. So we all are aligned on that. I think it's so interesting right now that everyone is having a unique experience in this time. So I talked to some of my CEOs that are talking to me out of their closet because it's the only space in the house. Or, some have 4 children under the age of 7. And I have college age kids, so I don't have that experience. So just trying to put yourself in their place and understanding we're all having really different experiences, and that's where the empathy comes into play. But then the question was really about, well, how do you keep everyone motivated, right, to do work? And so that's a little bit of a different thing in the sense that I think of, everything is uncertain, as we said, which means everything is changing, and it's very hard to forecast or predict what's going to happen. So having those like long-term big visions or those long-term project plans are a bit overwhelming and hard. And so as a mid-level manager, I really focus on trying to make those bite-sizable. So there's a more of a short-term objective. Okay, please, can we get this done in 2 weeks? And let's just chunk that out. So it feels a little bit more certain and tangible and gets them, up into their workspace, wherever that might be in their house every day. And then check in with them and see how that bite-sizable goal is going. I also think that as a mid-level manager, this is a hard time to lead, and it takes a lot of discipline. And it almost feels like we should have less discipline in this time, but it actually takes a ton of discipline and a lot of one-on-one communication with the folks that report to you. So you can really get a sense for where they are. And so I've tried to look at my calendar at the end of a week or at the beginning of a week and make sure I have time allocated on my calendar for one-on-one conversations to check in, because it's easy for them not to happen if I'm not really diligent about that.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I love the bite-sized goals advice. That's very, very good. And regular one-on-ones. Hey, Vijay, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree with everything that everyone said so far. It's a challenging time because, I think as leaders, we're often in organizations because we have the experience and the playbook of what to do, and nobody has a playbook for this. Like, we don't know nobody's like, oh yeah, the last pen. No, it doesn't exist, right? So I think a lot of us as leaders are still figuring out what to do here. So like, I think the best advice to give to middle managers is like, tell your leaders like, hey, like, here's what the struggles are having, because like we're unaware. I don't know what issues you're going through because we just don't know. Help us understand those things, and we'll be creative and work with you to figure out like solutions. But we don't have playbooks for this because we just have never gone through this before as well. And we're learning, again, I'll be ready for the next pandemic, but I don't know what to do right now. I'm learning on the job, how to manage through a pandemic, wildfires. These are all new experience for everybody. And we're all trying to figure out how to best manage and again, help us out by telling us your problems so we can figure them out, because we just don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things I was reflecting on the other day, sorry to jump in, but was like the word pandemic. Like, did we really use it before this year? No. Think of all the other words we're using regularly now, social distancing, and like, these are all part of our vocabulary that I didn't even know were things before this year.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So another question, again, focused on mid-managers. We talked about what should they do to manage their teams and keep the morale up. Now, what's some advice you can give to the mid-managers for them to successfully manage up? How should they be managing up with their bosses? And hope you mentioned one-on-ones, regular one-on-ones, and that may be a useful tip there. Any others that anybody else want to add, how to successfully manage up during these times?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like managing up is a thing right now. But I'm sure it is. It's just about communication and transparency. Just trying to be completely an open book as to what's really happening. It's the only way you're going to get help. And I think it's okay to need help right now. And the leaders should want, they want to give you help. So help point them in the right direction. But being very communicative and being completely open as to what's hard, I think is key. And that's probably different than in other times when you're managing up, but I think it's important.
Right. Communication is all the more important. It's always important, but it's all the more when you're not running into each other in hallways and stuff. That's one thing that we can do to help ourselves. Thank you. So now I want to move to senior leaders. So for the people who are senior leaders in their companies, they are balancing tough decisions with a vision for a brighter future, right? We talked about the economy is uncertain. Some people may have had to maybe making tough decisions, yet you have to paint a vision for a very bright future. You have to keep everyone's morale up. So how would you advise them to go about that? How to balance these competing things? And Hope, can we start with you? How are you managing this with your portfolio companies? What are you doing with messaging to your CEOs?
Yeah, the advice isn't much different. I mean, I think if anything, this whole pandemic has made us all on very equal footing and equal ground. But, as I think about it and managing through uncertain times, I think a leader needs to, I would say, have multiple scenarios, and then be open that you have multiple scenarios. So you have you need your organization to be healthy, like from a balance sheet perspective, a cash flow perspective. So what are your downside risk, your middle risk, and your upside risk? And quite frankly, you don't know which is going to be. And the trick is you need to be able to pivot between those scenarios quickly. So identifying maybe some unique KPIs that will help you know that. So for instance, if revenue is one of the things you're tracking, what's in your sales funnel and how is your sales funnel filling up? That might be an earlier indicator than the actual deal coming through. So you switch your focus to the outcomes of the KPIs to the creators of the KPIs, meaning what is the leading indicator, so you can pivot between the different scenarios quickly. It's interesting. run a group of about 50 CFOs of tech companies. And we do a survey once a month, what's your sentiment, at the beginning of the pandemic in March, and then in April, and then in May. And quite frankly, it's gotten better. The doomsday in March, and then it's gotten better. So they've been able to pivot up to their kind of middle scenario and manage that. So that's one of the things, is just adjusting the things you're looking at so you can adjust quickly. You have to be nimble. You have to be quick to change. And then how do you give guidance to your teams and to the folks that are looking for guidance? I lived 3 years in England, and I keep calm and carry on is like a mantra, right? Like, you just have to be steady Eddie at the wheel and give a sense of calm, but while being totally honest and transparent. But just like, it's okay, we're going to do this month, and we're going to get this done. And then next month we'll see, and we'll do something else. But just, giving a calmness in your direction, and that you have a set of objectives and a reason why you're going after them, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, excellent advice. Hey, Vijay, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all excellent advice in the sense that, it's like, as leaders, our job is to keep the company alive, is to keep the company running, keep the company moving. That means that, like, it's important and imperative that we, take early decisive actions to make sure that the company is going to be around, that people can, that the mission can continue. That's sometimes difficult. Sometimes it, entails really making tough decisions. Sometimes if you do it early and decisively, you can do it without those alternatives. But like, you have to make those decisions early on, and that's what allows you to, again, as Hope just mentioned, like, starting to think about. Again, like lets you kind of move up the optimism chart, because you said, look, I'm going to plan for the worst situation here. And again, I think that's the best advice one can do, is like, look, it's like, we have to be at times pessimists so that we can be optimists in the future. And the companies that made early decisive actions back in March are the ones that are come out of this stronger and healthier overall.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's the communication piece too. I mean, I think teams, even if they're impacted, can respect a hard decision if they get that transparency, if they understand why, and they feel like they've received kind of fair consideration, and that, it's being done, with the right metrics in place and for the right reasons and with the right expected outcomes. It's hard, but I think, folks can understand that. And if they feel like you're getting ahead of it, right? You're doing everything you can to keep things on the right trajectory, and to do the right thing for your employees and for your company.
Yeah. Excellent. Jen, do you want to add to that?
I really like the tips everyone have shared. And in particular, I want to comment an example that Hope reminded me here when she's, you were talking about bite size again, remain calm, right? Leadership in uncertain time means remain calm. That's what's required of leaders. In particular, when we run into crisis, the natural reaction for all of us is, what can I do to help? All hands on deck. In our recent example, if I recall back in March, it was actually the opposite that got us through. A particular example in my organization is, while everybody was thinking, let's go into this, everybody participate, triage, crisis resolution meetings, we actually intentionally said, we're only going to have one person out of the team joining these daily scrums, daily triage, right? And this allows the rest of the team to go focus on, quote unquote, the recover, right? So there's two things they can do. They either will be called on by the team members to say, I need you to do this to help with the immediate urgency. But more importantly, they get to do the analysis. They get to figure out the what if. They have all the parameters ready so we can plug things in as we learn. And that was super important in my area to ensure we get to recover pretty quickly. And in fact, that allowed the seamless user experience, right, from our apps. You don't see what's really going on, because in the back end, there's two layers of effort, one for immediate fire, but one for, more importantly, the what ifs that would get us back to normal.
Nice. And your point about getting only one person to join these daily scrums goes back to Nancy's point earlier, that we as leaders have only a few levers, and we can reduce the amount of overhead activities that we're putting on our people so that we really give them time to focus on what we want them to focus on. Excellent. So that's great. So moving on from organizational, I want to start looking at corporate leadership as the next category. We've talked about employee motivation, how to manage up, how to manage the teams, how to manage tough decisions. Now about corporate leadership, what's your advice? How should companies balance growth with survival during uncertain times, right? And we have touched on a few things earlier, but how should companies balance future investments and staying alive? Hope, can we start with you?
Sure. This is a hard one because we all want to grow, right? We all want to invest in growth. And most of us are with companies that is the intention and the reason why our investors are excited. I do think there's moments in time where focusing on survival is what we need to do. And probably in March, that's where we had to go, right? So something happened big in March and we all had to react very quickly with it without knowing which way we were going to go. I know that I work with a lot of small companies that are, on the raising money from VC cycle. And so the first thing we did in that week, and the first thing I did, was meet with all of them and help them replan and let's assess how much cash they have and how we can make it last as long as possible in case we needed to. Now, we also did, as I indicated before, I encouraged all my companies to do the 3 plan. So what was really the aggressive plan, but was probably the original plan, keep that one. And then have like a medium one and then have like a doomsday type situation. And then establish which metrics would kind of indicate which one we're on and then adjust quickly. So I have seen most of my companies be able to go back up and invest in growth again. And it's, one of the things that I think is so interesting during this time. And again, there's a couple positives, right? And we all wish this didn't happen, but a positive would be you become incredibly focused on what's critical. And so what I have loved to see is that in most of my situations, we are still investing in growth, but we took dollars away from something that wasn't as valuable as what we were thinking it was, because we just had to take a really hard lens at it. So I've been able to see us invest money more smartly as we became more aware and just completely crystallized where our money should be spent. And so I think that's one thing that's occurred over the last 6 months.
Yeah, very nice. That have a best case scenario, which was your aggressive plan, but also have the other plans so that you're prepared to, if you have to switch gears and go to another plan. Great advice. Hey, Nancy, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's like you have to redo your whole SWOT analysis, right? Like the entire context has changed. So in this new reality, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are the opportunities and threats? It's different because there's been this fundamental shift. And it may be that there are strengths that are really useful to you in this time, or weaknesses that are all of a sudden a big deal, but also there could be new opportunities. So there may be emerging customer needs, like we saw on my integrations team, people were using Zoom and Slack and all these collaboration tools a whole lot more than they used to. And so how can we help them do that better in order to make it easier for them to, as Hope said, focus on the critical, like to do their jobs and do them more efficiently. Like that's a thing that we can do that maybe wasn't so important in January. So I think if you can take that step back and say, okay, and again, with all the uncertainty, it's hard to say, is the context today the same as the context in 3 months, 6 months, especially back in the early days, we had no idea. But kind of take that assessment of, with this big change in context, what assumptions are now untrue that we need to then kind of rethink the plans we made based on those assumptions.
Yeah, excellent. Jen, anything to add to that?
I want to add an example about focusing on growth and not losing sight of long term. During pandemic or the last 6 months here, one thing in particular that challenged us is we now have to think about our working model and our working culture. So you guys probably noticed the announcement from Facebook where we're now looking into hiring remote team members, which is not a thing prior to this, right? We're being forced to look into this. This means how about virtual onboarding? This means about completely different recruiting strategy and hiring strategy. This means a lot of discussion internally, talking about how do we retain our culture. when much of this culture was about being in the same campus, being in very concentrated campus, right? We were extremely selective where, like, for example, in my organization, we're only limited globally to 3 locations. That's it, right? Because we spend so much time nurturing this day-to-day, this culture reflection. And then, of course, having video everywhere, every meeting we go, even before this. So now it's all going to be different. But the important thing I felt in this case is, although all the things are uncertain, leadership needs to remind team members not to take eyes off that future growth. And in my world, future growth means we have to continue to hire and invest the best talent, right? So this part is something we particularly worked hard for, both from hiring, but also changing the way or evolving the way of our hiring and growing here.
Excellent. Got it. And Vijay, do you want to close it out?
Yeah, I think in this time, like, lots of companies are in different buckets. Like, there's some where, the pandemic has actually expanded business opportunities. For a lot of companies, it's maybe neutral, and for some, unfortunately, like, it's really hurt them. So obviously, depending on where your situation is, like, this may be a place where you, like, double down and go all in and really invest a lot in growth. And for some places, again, it all depends on your company situation. I think it's important. It's imperative that you kind of look at where you are, make an honest assessment. One of the comments was made, which I totally agreed, is that, like, great, I'm rephrasing as a great product requires constraints, and that we just got a really large constraint put upon us, that we just don't have as many resources. There's not this, like, money is tight. Like, there's all those things that are occurring where we just know that it's a lot more, we have to prioritize a lot more. But that's what actually leads to great products, is people who are really willing to prioritize listening and invest in a few core areas they truly believe in. So I think any company can come out of this live. It's just a matter of, it's going to be a different playbook depending on what your situation is.
Yeah, relentless prioritization. Yeah, got it. Excellent. Very good. Let's start to look at some of the societal leadership issues that we have in front of us. So we've mentioned a number of social justice issues that are surrounding us, global matters that are surrounding us, environmental issues. Are companies accountable to their shareholders and to the society to address some issues like the ones that I mentioned? How should companies show leadership beyond what they show to their shareholders towards such social justice and environmental issues? Things like climate change, things like Black Lives Matter, equal pay for women, all of these things. So what do you think about companies' role in these matters? Let's start with Nancy.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of passion around this one, and I'm very firmly on the side that companies should take a stand when it crosses over from opinion into human rights. And I've heard our CEO say this a number of times, and I'm sure it's from a famous quote, is that society changes at a crawl until every once in a while it leaps. And this really feels like one of those times. And those leaps are painful, right? There's deep belief systems that are being shaken. And I'm talking about mostly the racial unrest and Black Lives Matter movements. And if a company really cares deeply about its employees, its partners, its customers, then how can they back away from an issue that's actively harming those people? Mm-hmm. So at HubSpot, our CEO put out a very clear statement specifically in support of Black Lives Matter, and not just to use our voice as a company, but to commit to changes. Because, I mean, as he said, like, we haven't certainly taken enough action on racism, on diversity and inclusion within our own walls. And so committing to take further action, to be accountable, and to drive real change. So I've been really proud of that. I think it's difficult, but I think it's important when it comes down to a real kind of human rights type of issue.
It's admirable. Jen, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I can add a story here from Facebook perspective. Our mission is to bring people closer together. And this in particular is meaningful for small businesses who may not have these large commercial vehicle, right? Or as Vijay said earlier, may be under extreme pressure under today's situation, given they no longer have the physical outreach to the community that they're trying to serve. So in this time, Facebook really became sort of the go-to vehicle, right? The delivery vehicle for these small business while the business owners are stuck at home, right? They're not allowed to go out and open their shops. You will see in the last 6 months, our feature release tends to be focused in the area of either Facebook Shops or Facebook Marketplace, largely allowing and enabling these small business to find new ways, even new business models, as Hope was talking about earlier on, right? To be able to survive and hopefully to thrive. In fact, on top of that, there's also very specific community grants for these small businesses, right? Sponsored by Facebook to say, come in and use the tool. And in addition, these are also the assistance from, in the form of grants.
That's excellent. Very nice. Vijay, you want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think companies are accountable to their employees. Like a company is accountable to its employees, and employees should feel comfortable pushing their company to kind of express a certain viewpoint. Like I think that's totally appropriate and fair. And again, we like what's it called in tech, we have a loud voice. We know we have a lot of privilege just in the areas we're in. We should use that. And again, and I think that's like that's where we should kind of push for change and demand accountability from our companies. The companies are nothing more than a collection of people working on a common mission. I think and it's important that we as employees and we as members of the company like express those desires and whatnot. So it's like I don't think it's incumbent on like just the CEO to say here's what they need to be informed by the employees of what we think is right. And obviously that's I think that's incumbent on the employees to actually say this. And again, and the reverse is that the companies are absolutely responsible to those people to say how we are. We are here to bring people together to serve a common mission. And if they're asking something, we should take into account and really listen to that carefully.
Got it. Perfect. And Hope? Want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's to say that the companies need to take a stand or the leader of the company needs to take a stand, I think is clearly yes, right? It's the only way to change some really broken items in our society, in our world, and in our culture. I love how Vijay said that companies are a collection of people, right? Well, a collection of people are powerful and they can get things done. So it needs to be used for that. One of the things that I think about is like, okay, I'm a really practical person. So the harder question is the how and the what. Like, how do you do it? And what are you doing? And because I think it's really easy to say, yes, we should do it. And so this is where I spend a lot of our time, I'm sure we all do, is like, what's the how and what are the whats that we're doing? And, I always say that, I'll take the first stance of like looking internally to your company. And what can we do there? It's a little bit more manageable than looking externally first. But when you look internally, like what are you doing? And I always say the only way to actually like get change in a company is to put numbers and goals on it and then measure people by it. Maybe that's the CFO in me, but like, are you saying that certain percentage of, our employee base needs to be diverse in certain categories? Are you changing your hiring practices? How are you ensuring that those diverse groups feel welcomed and have a like population within them to work? I am often the only woman in the room. I'm sure many of you out there are often the only woman in the room. It's not a great place to be. Like we can be the token female and be like, yay, I'm diverse. But it's actually really uncomfortable if you don't have another one sitting by you. It's just a fact. And I've seen it in all my board meetings and all my executive meetings. So how do we create more of that, in our environment? So that's the internal look. And then there's the external look, which is harder for a company, I think. And where do you draw that line? And again, what are the hows and the whats are you? I know one of the things we did was try to say, okay, if we can pool our resources together as employees, through different mechanisms and then give to one organization, maybe we can have a bigger impact. Because again, to Vijay's point, we're a group of people and we're stronger together. So can we pull together? But those are the types of questions that I think need to be asked. And again, I'm a big fan of measurement. Creates action.
Yeah, that's perfect. Actually, that leads us into the next question. So on some of these matters, some of the sensitive matters, right, there is considerable division in our society, right? For some of the things we would all agree, yes, we should jump in. But for some of these, there are varied opinions, diverse opinions, and our own employees might have different opinions or beliefs, or our customers might not agree with the position that the company decides to take. So, and what risk do companies run in taking overt positions, and how should they balance that? Yeah, so let's start with Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly is a risk. And I think the risk cuts both ways. I think companies take a risk by not taking overt positions in certain cases. The statement by the Coinbase CEO was a hot topic this past week. And that may help them in some cases and hurt them in others, where people felt like that, wasn't what they wanted to hear or what they thought was an appropriate response. But I think the companies do need to choose where they're going to take a stand, right? And I feel that in the case of where it's kind of a human rights thing, clearly right and wrong, like, do you really want stakeholders that support continued harm to your employees and customers? Like, for example, racism, like, do you want those people using your product, talking about your product on your platform? I'm not so sure. So I think you have to know that risk going in and decide kind of which overt stances are you going to take that you're going to actually back that up.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. Very good. Jen?
I think this is such a complex issue, and we as leaders need to be mindful walking in that it's more important to make sure all different perspectives are getting reflected, and it is okay to demonstrate to our team members that we will learn and adapt as we find out more. One example, small, but I felt important and factual that I wanted to share here is, we were looking into doing some activities virtually to keep the team motivated and energized. So in June, the original intent was to roll out a talk, an activity, inviting guest speakers from outside, focusing on self-care. Interestingly, a millennial team member, came to me to say, I think we should hold off, right? This is when everything was already set up, lined up a month ago. And her point was, there's so much going on the platform talking about Black Lives Matters and other social issues. We should just let the platform be completely, focused in these voices and not to have any sort of distraction, right, from such major topic. So we did. The result of that is we delayed self-care, which I know we're coming to later on, right, for about a month. I'm saying this in jokingly fashion, but just reflect on that. It made me think leadership here is not always being right, be very open to other teams' perspective. And again, as some of the panelists have called out earlier, just be honest, communicate, right? Communicate what you know, communicate later on what you learned and what the decision was. And, things will move on as we all learn together.
You are actually bringing up two important points here. One, you were open to input from your team member and you changed the strategy based on that because that seemed the right move at that point. And the other thing I want to highlight based on what you said was that it's not just for the companies to take a stance. We are all leaders at some level. So we all in our own capacity can demonstrate leadership and support for whatever we believe in. That's perfect. Hey, Hope, do you want to add to this?
Sure. This is a really tough one because, companies are representative of all sorts of people. A company wasn't pulled together because everyone believed the same thing. They were pulled together because you needed different skill sets in different areas, right? Which means that you get all sorts of different beliefs. So you do have to be, I think, sensitive to what the external messaging is to understand that you do have all sorts of opinions within that entity. I also want to bring out the fact that I don't think we've talked about this yet. An important role in a company is to protect its investors as well. And in fact, you would argue at a board level, that's their number one job, is to represent the public shareholders or the private investors as well. So that's a constituent that really needs to be kept in mind as well. That being said, I think I said earlier that it is important you're a group of people that can be very powerful. So if we can give them vehicles to unite and take a stance externally, that's exciting. But it is one that you have to navigate really carefully. And I don't think I have a great answer.
Yeah, right? And there is no single answer out there. Each company's position is different in how they're placed and what's the clientele they're serving. But that's where the balancing act comes in. Right to the core of the question. Vijay, do you want to add to this?
I agree with almost everything I said before. I think the only thing I would add is that, you know, I think CEOs and leaders companies are often we're so focused on keeping the company alive that we forget that we're also humans. We're also living in this moment. Like we have a platform, like, you know, the company can survive a lot of things. And the question is, like, are we going to feel comfortable with the decisions we made along the way to make that happen? And you know, again, that's the job of the CEO. That's why I'm not a CEO. It's a really hard role. But you know, I think it's important even as leaders that we kind of look at it and say, look, we have a platform. Like maybe we don't get the eggs we want out of this thing, but at the same time, are we comfortable with the decisions we made along the way to achieve this outcome?
Very good insight. We sometimes do forget that we are all humans surrounded by humans. We get so focused, myself included, on the work that forget about the human aspect. But thank you for all those insights. Moving on to 42, I think we can take a couple more. And I think this would be very popular among the attendees. This is focused on self-leadership, right? As an individual, what should I do to conquer all the negative news that's all around us? People are doom scrolling on Twitter, right? There's just negativity all around, negative news all around us. So how can individuals show self-leadership to maintain a sense of sanity, positivity? Start with Vijay.
I mean, I think like for me, like I bought a Peloton and that was critical. You know, I think you have exactly like, I think it's like, you got to take care of yourself first. And, you know, like at various points, like I remember like I went through an acquisition a couple years ago and I gained 40 pounds, right? Like you got to just like take care of yourself first. Because you can't take it. It's like it's the mantra they tell you when you get in an airplane. It's like, put your mask on before you help other people. And you got to do the same thing. So I think everyone has to realize, like, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And you got to go understand like that, like that's actually being a good teammate and a good leader, is carving out the time of the day saying, I need this for myself. Otherwise I won't be able to do this in the morning.
Carve out time for yourself. Excellent tip. Jane?
I would definitely echo that. I think as leaders, demonstrating how we're taking care of ourselves is actually a very powerful message, enabling your team members, especially women, or in this case, you know, like some of the moms who always felt guilty about, you know, I did not do all for my family or whoever that I'm supporting. Instead, I'm spending some time for myself, right? This prevents burnout. This is extremely critical. One example here, we now in Facebook has a formal program called COVID leave. This leave is in addition to PTO, in addition to sick days. These are paid leaves that you're allowed to use to, if you have, let's say, a lack of daycare situation that you needed to take care of a family member due to today's COVID situation. So recently, when one of my colleagues here took leave, he announced by writing a post to the whole organization, and it's a pretty large organization, to say, I'm on COVID leave for 2 weeks. See you guys when when I get back. It is important. Honestly, we have plenty of PTO days or you know, these other mechanisms we can use, but it's very important to, you know, walk the talk and demonstrate to the team member that it is okay. Because only when you start to do this, others would feel truly empowered to go take care of themselves.
Excellent. Walk the talk. Excellent. Hope?
Yeah, I think we've all learned some new patterns during this time. I don't know about you all, but I had to adjust to, like, I used to get up in the morning, leave early, get to the office, work in the office, you know, whatever it was. I had my routine, order my lunch. And now I found, you know, at first when I started this, just sitting in front of Zoom all day, I felt like nauseated by the end of the day and zoning out. And I learned that I really needed to take walk breaks, you know, like just get out and walk and move and like re-energize my head. Also just figuring out lunches at home that I could grab quickly, like making sure I planned for those at the beginning of the week and that they were accessible. And yeah, I just think all these little tricks and patterns that I have learned over the last 6 months have allowed me to stay engaged and intellectually active. The other thing has been like more phone calls, maybe in moments versus all Zoom and video. So talking to my admin and saying, okay, let's make certain pockets of time or certain types of interactions be phone calls versus Zoom to just help that enablement. and then also be respectful of people's windows of time, because it does feel like I could be working on Saturdays and Sundays. It's not any different than Tuesdays or Wednesdays. And just being respectful of my teammates' time, that I don't expect everyone to be on all the time just because we're all sitting at home. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but I think what's interesting is like, I've learned these little patterns and tricks. I'm still learning them. So if anyone has any ideas, send them my way. And then what I will carry over into the post-pandemic world.
Those are all, I think we're all dealing with like Zoom fatigue and all of that. So sometimes if you're not on the camera, it helps just to be on the phone and stuff with kids running around in the back and stuff. So that's a good tip. So Nancy, I want to take the next question and start with you. What advice would you give to individuals to navigate these turbulent times so that they come out stronger on the other end?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one thing we're learning through all this, it's resilience, right? And that's a skill that's going to be useful in all kinds of times. But in a crisis, I mean, you're really kind of falling back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Vijay got a little bit of this, right? You got to like, are you safe and secure? Is your family okay? Is your health okay? Okay, now like, maybe I can think about, am I satisfied with my job or whatever? And kind of give yourself some grace on, maybe you don't need to learn a brand new skill right now. Like people are talking about, you know, oh, I learned this and I knit like 18 scarves and I'm like, I'm barely alive and my kid is driving me crazy. So like give yourself some of that, that grace and that forgiveness to like stick to the bottom of the pyramid if you need to, and just like make sure that you're getting out of bed in the morning, getting everyone fed, feeling pretty good, getting a little exercise and doing your job well versus like taking on some brand new challenge. Which is hard, right? I mean, I think anyone who's at this conference is probably a fairly ambitious person, and you don't want to lose that, but you also don't want to sacrifice your health for in service of kind of that. So thinking about that, and then kind of getting at both questions, do celebrate the wins, like for yourself and for your team. Like it can get very doom and gloom, and it can be like focusing on the crisis all the time and contingency plans and, you know, this and that, but like, we're getting stuff done. We're getting stuff out the door. We're, you know, whatever it is, winning deals or whatever is the thing for your company. So celebrate those, celebrate the personal wins, celebrate the things your company is doing to make things better. And just, you know, make sure that you're not erring too side on, let's talk about the crisis all the time, but also talk about the good stuff.
Excellent tip.